It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as CM Punk reveals which AEW wrestlers he wants to work with. We discuss how AEW's handling of Brody Lee's passing played a part in his decision to join. And Tony Khan and Punk discuss teasing the debut without officially announcing it. All that and more coming up in today's video, but first... As everyone knows by now, at last night's AEW Rampage The First Dance special, CM Punk returned to wrestling by making his All Elite debut in front of a hometown Chicago crowd in the United Center. Today's video is going to be all about CM Punk, as there's just so much to get through from what we didn't see on the show, as well as news from the post-media scrum with Punk and AEW president Tony Khan, who discussed the matter for an hour. Whilst Punk only appeared once throughout the night, and that was to open the show, there was some interesting stuff that happened off air. Firstly, before the show, Tony Khan welcomed the Chicago crowd to the venue, and whilst they chanted CM Punk, he promised that they will not be disappointed and thanked them for trusting AEW. The song Sirius was played right before the show went live to pump the crowd up, and this song was used by the Chicago Bulls in the Michael Jordan era and was posted to social media by Punk a couple of weeks ago, which was one of the many clues of his appearance ahead of tonight, with the United Center of course being the home of the Bulls. This let the crowd know that he was going to show up, and this is what sparked the CM Punk chants that opened the show and made it clear that he was imminently appearing. After the show came to a close, Jon Moxley, Eddie Kingston, Sting and Darby Allin each passed the mic around, and Sting told the AEW crowd that they are first-class citizens, which is a reference to when WCW fans would be called second-class citizens. Darby Allin then went last, welcoming CM Punk's earlier challenge for a match at All Out, telling him that it will be an honor. After this, Eddie Kingston brought Tony Khan to the ring, who gave a short speech, with the crowd chanting "Thank you, Tony," before Khan thanked the crowd for believing in AEW and promised that he will never let them down. Next up, after CM Punk's AEW debut last night, Punk and AEW president Tony Khan took part in a media scrum where they were asked a bunch of questions. They were both asked how long they had been in talks, with Tony revealing that they actually first spoke in 2018 before AEW was even incepted. Punk then added that this round of talks have been on and off for around 18 months, revealing that the process involves getting to know Tony Khan whilst talking to people already with AEW, and he said, "I'll go ahead and spoil that I've been talking to Tony for probably a year and a half about this. Some girls are easy to get into bed, I am not. I need to be wined and dined." That's not, "Oh, I need more money and less dates," and "Oh, I need this, I need that." It was literally just talking to Tony and getting to know him, and the more people that he employed that I knew, I'd ask them questions and they'd tell me things. As we know, Tony had the idea of AEW long before it was created, with him having talks with TNT and seemingly the top stars he planned on signing ahead of time. Elsewhere on the media scrum, Punk was asked about how long his deal with AEW is, and whilst he was reluctant to reveal the exact details, he did say that he's not here for the short term and said, "I don't really know if you want to know how the sausage is made. One of the biggest appeals of AEW looks like they show up. Have a good time. You don't want to know the terms of my contract. Just know that I'm here. I'm not a short-term thing, and I'm here to help everyone that wants help." Khan then added that Punk will work a full-time schedule, and he said, "This isn't a short-term thing or a part-time thing. This is full-time, and we're very excited." This is of course great news and means that we're going to get plenty of CM Punk on-screen moments and matches as we head into this new era of AEW. CM Punk was later asked if he had any heat with anybody in the AEW locker room, with the journalist seemingly referencing the fallout between Punk and Colt Cobana. Most of you will already know, but Punk and Cobana were both sued for defamation by WWE Dr. Chris Amann after a podcast involving the two. The case was then dismissed, but then Colt sued Punk for legal fees that he allegedly promised him. Whilst Cobana wasn't referenced by name, Punk replied, "I don't have a single problem with anybody that was here tonight. I don't think I need to do the gossipy stuff because it's a pretty positive night and there's no reason to be down or negative." Whilst it's not clear if Cobana was at the show or not, and perhaps Punk's way of getting around admitting heat was by only mentioning those at the show, but yeah, let's not read into that too much and let's just move on to the next question and keep things positive. Punk went on to make a list of names that he's looking forward to working with, mentioning many of AEW's younger talent. It seems that Punk wants to take it upon himself to help elevate the next generation, and he said, "I get excited about the prospect of me working with Brian Pillman Jr., Powerhouse Hobbs, Ricky Starks, Jungle Boy, Darby Allin, Jon Moxley. Never worked with Jon Moxley before, literally just everybody. I've never done anything with the Young Bucks, I've never stepped in the ring with Kenny Omega." And just a note about the Moxley thing, he did work with Dean Ambrose, but I think he means the new incarnation of that man. I think there's so many dream matches, I think that's what people would call them, but they're just dream situations. Who knows who else is coming? I don't know. You can't probably know. You're the boss, but there's just different combinations that I think people can get excited about. It feels live. I'm jazzed to be here. I'm excited to be here. And if this doesn't show that Punk isn't here to quote bury the younger talent, then I don't know what will. The first line of his promo in 7 years put Britt Baker over by saying that the Chicago crowd made him feel like Britt Baker in Pittsburgh. This follows 2 shows last week in Pittsburgh, Baker's hometown, where she received a hero's welcome. Her being mentioned in Punk's first line of his first promo back in wrestling is a pretty big deal. And by going by his answer of who he'd like to work with, Britt isn't the only name he wants to help elevate, starting with Darby Allin at All Out. Punk went on to discuss what influenced him to join AEW, and he revealed that the company's handling of Brody Lee's death played a big part. As we know, Brody sadly passed away in December last year, and whilst his poor health was known by the AEW roster and employees, it never became public until the news of his death officially broke. Punk was first asked about who knew about his debut before he elaborated on the Brody situation and said, "I told my wife, I had to run it by her. I think everybody else would be like, hey, are you doing it?" And I would just be like, silent, and they would be like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, this goes back to one of the appealing things about AEW for me. It's a bit of a bummer of a topic. Brody Lee passes away, right? Come to find out he was sick, but nobody knew. Nobody said anything to anybody because it's nobody's business. A lot of respect for everybody back here. Brody, love Brody. So seeing that, there's something about that, you know? If that were anywhere else, it would have been all over the internet. His poor wife would have been having to deal with that, on top of already dealing with the tragic event. The death of Brody Lee was handled with a touch of class from everybody within AEW, not only down to the lack of leaks, but the tribute show and the way they embraced Nolan and Brody Jr. was so heartwarming to see, and I still miss him to this very day. But getting back to Punk, Tony and his latest signee elaborated on the debut being leaked ahead of time, and if you've been following this channel, we've covered every single aspect of a possible tease or leak, and this was whilst it was heavily teased on AEW television. AEW did everything but announce that he'd be there, whilst letting everyone know that he'd be there. Punk said that it was the worst kept secret, but for a reason, hinting that this was the plan all along, and said, "They knew I was going to be here, but they weren't sure, and man, isn't that fun. Worst kept secret designed that way for a reason. You can criticize and say, well, they should advertise, maybe the ratings will be better. It's about the moments. It's about the moments and making people go, oh man, I can't miss the show, I don't know what's going to happen, this is fun, and I want to be part of it." They went on to say that the hype was a collaboration between Punk and Tony Khan, with the wrestler himself wanting to keep it as a surprise appearance, whilst Tony's instincts wanted to sell out the building as a businessman. It seems they met halfway, teasing it and potentially leaking it without officially announcing it, and I gotta say, it worked perfectly. Most people knew that he'd be there, but even when that music hit, it was still a shock, especially when it was to open the show. Even if they didn't maximize the ratings for AEW Rampage The First Dance, everybody will be tuning into Dynamite this week to see what happens, and I think that's going to be the key rating that can indicate how much CM Punk will move the needle for AEW. Punk is set to make his next AEW appearance this Wednesday, where he'll likely interact with his all-out pay-per-view opponent Darby Allin and his mentor Sting. And before you go, make sure you check out my video where I discuss the secret wrestling returns of CM Punk during his so-called retirement.